The room fell silent the moment she walked in. 20 Navy SEALs, some of the most physically elite human beings on the planet, sat in a cramped briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command. They had survived Hell Week. They had survived cold water and sleep deprivation and things most people cannot even imagine. And every single one of them turned to look at the small woman in her early 60s who had just stepped through the door. She was 5'3". She had silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore a plain navy blazer and carried a manila folder. Commander Dale Harmon, a decorated veteran with 2 bronze stars to his name, stepped forward. His voice had the controlled authority of a man used to being obeyed. He said, "Ma'am, this is a restricted briefing." "Who sent you?" She looked up at him with the calm patience of someone who has heard that question many times before. She set the folder down on the table. She opened it. Inside were photographs, training logs, and after-action reports spanning 31 years. She said, "Nobody sent me, Commander. I trained most of the men who trained you." Her name was Ruth Mallory. And before that day, almost nobody in that room had ever heard of her. Ruth grew up in rural Kentucky in the 1950s, the daughter of a coal miner and a school teacher. Her father loved 2 things above all else: his family and the United States Marine Corps, in which he had served during Korea. He used to say that real strength was not about how hard you could hit. It was about how clearly you could think when everything around you was on fire. Ruth listened. Ruth remembered. She was 24 years old when she first walked into a federal government training facility in Virginia, hired as a civilian consultant to help redesign the psychological resilience curriculum for special operations candidates. The military establishment of 1981 was not particularly interested in what a young woman from Kentucky had to say about mental toughness. But her supervisor at the time, a gruff Navy captain named Elias Webb, gave her one afternoon to make her case. She stood at the front of a room, full of skeptical men, and she asked them one question. She said, "When a man is exhausted, sleep-deprived, freezing cold, and operating on pure instinct, what is the one thing that determines whether he makes the right call or the wrong one?" One of the men in the room said, "Training." Ruth nodded. "And what is the training for? What are we actually building when we put a man through the hardest physical experience of his life?" Nobody answered. She said, "We are building a decision-making architecture. We are teaching the nervous system that panic is not information, that fear is not a stop sign, that the gap between impulse and action is where character lives." Captain Webb leaned back in his chair and said, "Go on." Ruth spent the next 3 decades doing exactly that. She developed what became known inside special operations circles as the Mallory Protocol, though her name was never officially attached to it. It was a framework for psychological conditioning that wove together cognitive behavioral techniques, Stoic philosophy, neuroscience, and old-fashioned Appalachian wisdom about endurance. Candidates who went through her updated curriculum showed measurable improvements in decision-making under stress. Dropout rates in certain programs fell. Mission success rates improved. Senior commanders knew the results. Almost none of them knew the woman behind them. Ruth did not care about the credit. She cared about the outcome. She raised 2 children largely on her own after her husband passed from cancer in 1994. She drove a 12-year-old Subaru. She lived in a modest house outside Annapolis with a vegetable garden and 3 cats named after Greek philosophers. She kept no medals because she had never been awarded any. She kept no commendations because the nature of her work did not generate official paperwork with her name on it. What she kept were letters, hundreds of them, from operators and officers who had tracked her down over the years to say, "I do not fully know why I made it through, but I know it was because of something I learned that I did not expect to learn. I know it changed how I think. I know it saved my life or someone else's." Now, back in that briefing room, Commander Harmon was quiet for a long time. He was looking at the photographs. He was reading the names in the training logs. He recognized several of them as men he deeply respected. men who had shaped his own understanding of leadership and courage. He looked up at Ruth Mallory. He said, quietly, "Why are you here today?" She said, "Because the program is drifting. You are producing men who are physically exceptional and strategically limited. You are measuring the wrong things, and the candidates are learning to optimize for the measurement instead of for the mission. I have watched it happen before, and I watched it get corrected before, and I would like to help you correct it again." Commander Harmon pulled out a chair. He said, "Please sit down." Ruth Mallory worked with Naval Special Warfare Command for another 4 years after that afternoon. She never received a formal title. She never appeared in a press release. When she retired for the final time at age 67, there was a small gathering in a conference room with good coffee and a handwritten card signed by 43 people. She drove home in her Subaru. She fed her cats. She sat on her back porch and watched the sun go down over the Chesapeake Bay. There is a version of this story that people love to tell, where Ruth Mallory finally gets the recognition she deserved, where the cameras show up, where the ceremonies happen, where the world learns her name. But the real story is more powerful than that. Ruth never wanted the cameras. She wanted the work. She wanted the outcome. She built something that outlasted every conflict in which it was used. That lived inside the decision-making of thousands of operators who never knew where their mental framework had come from. That quietly bent the arc of human performance towards something better. She once said, in a small seminar that was never recorded, "The most important things you will ever build will not have your name on them. They will have other people's futures in them. That is a better deal." Here's what Ruth Mallory understood that most of us spend our whole lives resisting. Real influence does not announce itself. Real strength does not demand to be seen. The work that shapes the world is almost always done by people who are too busy doing it to stop and take credit for it. You may be building something right now that you cannot fully see. You may be planting seeds in conversations, in relationships, in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. You may be teaching someone something without knowing you are teaching it. You may be someone else's Ruth Mallory, and you may never find out. That is not a tragedy. That is the whole point. If this story moved you in any way, take 1 second and hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear these stories. Drop a comment below telling me about someone in your life who shaped you quietly, someone who never got the credit they deserve. I read every single one, and if you are new here at Soul Relief Stories, welcome. Subscribe and come back anytime you need a reminder that the world contains more quiet greatness than the noise would have you believe. I will see you in the next one.